Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. The panelists come on out. We received a ton of questions from folks through the meetup group, so we're going to kind of run through those questions, and then if time allows, we'll go to the audience as well. I'm Rick Turoczy. I'm the co-founder and general manager of Pi, an early stage startup that has had a few of these companies, had the pleasure of having a few of these companies come through our doors. I also run Silicon Florist, which is a blog that covers the startup scene here in town. I think what I'm going to do is have each of the panelists introduce themselves, their role, their company, and then also kind of explain mobile's, what mobile means to that company. So you'll find some of these companies are actually focusing on an app that is used by a consumer. Others are providing services. So you can get a good feel for what the panel is going to talk about as they answer these questions. So you want to go ahead and begin?
Sure. Can you hear me? All right. My name is Jonathan Karon. I'm the engineering manager here at New Relic. New Relic, I would say we actually have two mobile strategies. One is that we sell an SDK that monitors the performance of mobile apps out in production, so you as a developer can understand what's going well and not so well. And then we also produce mobile apps that our customers use to watch themselves watching the data that their mobile apps are producing.
I'm Michael Richardson. I'm a co-founder and director of product at Urban Airship, and our mission is to make communicating with your mobile audience as easy and as wonderful as possible. So mobile for us is pretty much everything that we do. We try and make the experiences that we offer to our customers the best possible ones for their end users on mobile devices.
Sasha is the director of Solur. Everything we do is to try and make people awareness about their money, and so we try to serve that in everything we ship. It's a bank, first and foremost, everybody, we're only online, and so there's no branch where to be contacted if you want to. So nothing else we changes, everything you want in the bank, we're trying to provide through the app and our services, so it's very fun.
My name is Sri. I'm the GM for wearables and Internet of Things for a slightly bigger company, Hewlett-Packard. And, I'm focused on wearables and IoT. And the rules there are much different from mobile. But having said that, one of the most popular apps that we created for printing from mobile devices is My Baby. And that's basically the why printer division. So happy to talk about that.
One thing I just wanted to start out the discussion with, and we'll keep it kind of open, and if people have questions like about responses, feel free to raise your hands. We'll try and call on you as well. But one of the things I wanted to discuss early is mobile strategy still a thing, or is it just strategy? Like, back in the old days, you had a web strategy. Now it's just part of strategy. Has mobile crossed that gap yet, or is it still a specific thing that companies need to be focused on? Sasha, did you want to?
Sure. I think it's still a very specific thing. One of the things we talk about a lot at Simple is some of the stuff that people find the most important, just feature and things about the bank happen to be oriented. But so much what we're trying to do is take things that are very stodgy or well-known industry in banking and think about what would be different within that if we can offer those things through a phone. In examples, we talk a lot about the first day experience, which is a common thing. You're talking about mobile interactions, but for us, there's multiple first days really bank. You can get first day in the app, first day you get your credit card in, the first day you're spending something. That can span a week or more. So talking about how we can shrink those down and take advantage of where you can have the distribution, or you can rely on the day that would happen, you put the app on the phone and you set it up. So those are all the things that are unique. Then we can run as a web shipping software. And what that means in banking is something that some people only scratch the surface of. And in a lot of ways, lots of industries that are well understood. It's probably still just the early days about what's really the best for mobile interaction.
MT, did you have?
Yeah, I think somebody said it really well, where mobile is the customer experience strategy, but it's still very much a singular and specific function in most businesses. I think to its detriment a little bit, but where it comes into play is that the people who are interacting with their mobile properties have devices. They see where the lag is, they see where the gaps are, and they're trying to make that better in many ways. Everybody has a sense of where it falls down typically. So it is still a siloed function, but people are thinking about the ways that they can use it to make their businesses better.
Shri, what about from like HP's perspective?
Well, the world's population is 7+ billion, and the number of mobile subscribers is around 5.6 billion. If you actually look at the number of people below the poverty line, it's 2.6 billion. And for most of you who know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like, water, food, shelter. But then, if you actually look in the new world era, it's like, water, food, mobile, and then shelter. So there's been an underlying socioeconomic shift. So it has to be the strategy for all the companies, and everything else has been relooked. So from the world, the era of web, where you had 300 million devices connected to the internet, to the world of mobile, where there is close to around 6 billion or 7 billion devices connected to the internet, you have to rethink your strategies to make it mobile first. So.
I think there's lots of issues where actually something more so today, we pay attention to lots of financial startups and people that are all over the world, and banking is interesting too, because in the country that I live in, how you keep track of your money is also very underdeveloped, but a lot of them have cell phones, and it's the easiest way for them to deal with transactions in a lot of cases.
And in a lot of those cases, they've already leapfrogged, like Kenya, for example, has a very substantial mobile infrastructure already around that. So that's super interesting. Jonathan, did you have anything?
Yeah. I feel like you can't hear me, but you probably can. Okay, awesome. I think it depends on where you are as an organization with relation to strategy. If you're coming from a place where people are using your product or services in a way that doesn't work well in a mobile context, then maybe mobile has to be a mobile strategy focused around, well, what can people make use of? But then as you evolve to the point where you're acknowledging, gosh, maybe we need to reinvent our company and the way we do business around mobility, then it's still, there are things that don't work in a mobile context, and there are things that don't work sitting at your desk. And you have to acknowledge that it's no different than product design or user experience or anything else, where there are things that work really, really well in certain contexts, and you need to acknowledge that as you build your strategy tent.
That's great. That's a great response. When you're building those things, there's the world of iOS and there's the world of Android, and there are others as well. But I mean, primarily, sometimes than they are here for consumers to use. Where do you see your organizations falling? Where do you see your consumers falling in terms of platforms? And then as far as your development teams go, where do you see them gravitating? Which has the most potential for long-term strategic gain for companies right now?
So shipping sometimes higher and lower on layers, the benefits for some platforms is there. In general, I think we find it always difficult to get something that's really great for our customers. And for the while, it's really interesting because the vast majority of the consumers is Android, but we certainly get people who ask for Windows Phone, for example, because that's the choice they made. And because we offer services exclusively through mobile as a channel, or something like remote deposit catcher, to take a picture of your check to put it in your account. It is a conscious choice. It's like, we're not going to do Windows Phone. It's they're really just saying they're not going to be a customer of ours anytime soon. So that's a tough balance. But we kind of have to, business, you can understand we're actually really about for it. Maybe tons to want to deal. We feel like we barely scratch the surface of it, still iOS and Android. So adding another platform is a big commitment. Even just picking up something like an iPad out, which seems not that disparate from iOS development, but it's probably very different in terms of what we might want to ship.
Sri?
Yeah, I think it's a very tough question to answer. If you were to take a segmented approach, I can say, oh, well, if you're doing developing economies, I would try to start with Android. Or if you just take China, where GMS is not available, who would you go with? So, but from a generic perspective, I think you have no choice but to support, the two big platforms and the distant third. You have no choice at this point.
Is there, and maybe to Michael and Jonathan, like in terms of talent, is there any better or worse platform to be pursuing at this point in time, or is everything just as competitive?
I mean, it's customer driven, so you just have to do whatever it takes for your business, and you have to figure out how to make it happen. I find the Android or iOS or whatever platform question to be sort of uninteresting at this point, because it's about where your users are and what you can do for your users. So we have some customers that do large things in Italy where Windows has, for some reason, surprisingly high market share. That's incredibly important for them, and so they have to support that. And it doesn't matter that they don't like developing on it. It's their customers.
I had an interesting chat with a couple of startups recently on this, because they asked, 3 people in a garage trying to figure out how to get their product to market. And they said, do we build this on a platform we're familiar with, get it out quick, and worry that someone else is going to come along, implement it cross-platform, and just kill us on adoption because of the synergy there? Or do we spend all the extra time trying to build this version 1 for platforms we don't really know and learn that? And kind of to MT's point, you got to pick one and go with the strategy. I do think SMS is another platform, if you will, that's worth considering depending on what you're building. There are web, SMS, these other things that are not smartphone platforms, but do get you sort of a different cross-section of customer segmentation.
Another aspect of that, we bring back to kind of reality a little bit. Simple, everything Simple has ships on iOS 1.5 before it had the Android version of the app. We see, I think, similar growth between the two today in terms of people adding up in their phones. We see a gap in terms of the total usage, just because iOS had an extra 1.5 years in the wild. But another way to think about it, and I agree, ship what you think you can, get into the wild and get validation with. Another way to think about it is people who are asking you for support that's on the platform. We would use your stuff if you had just this one other thing. That's great. You want to collect that and keep that conversation going. And even if you have to disappoint them in the short term, like saying or talk about it or whatever the response is, that's still an indication of where you might want to go. You should pay attention. They'll certainly forgive you if you come back a year later and say, well, it's here now, I know it took an extra year, but they'll probably still sign up. So it's just an exclusive game. If you sign up, you'll never see them again.
I think part of it also depends on the type of business that you have. If you are a retail business, for example, and you're trying to support your customers, that's kind of a different thing than a media or a gaming play where distribution is how you make your money, and distribution engagement more so than direct sale or customer support.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another kind of along that same theme that I think I often hear more from startups than companies that have resources to put to these kind of things, but is the discussion between responsive design web app versus a native app that you install. Like, what are your feelings there? Again, I think it comes back to more what can you do, but do you have specific opinions on responsive versus native?
I was a developer background, so I don't know why it's these days, but I think it's important I think it's best for at that moment. We're about to ship, to kind of sign up through the app as a simple customer, and that's something we're working on for quite some time. We certainly want it to be a beautiful new experience, and it's amazing and all right. But we have constraints like anybody else. We're looking at how much work they need, validate forms, and really become a good experience. We're going to deliver very quickly. This is the website that was pretty close. So we're actually combining the two in this case. So it's going to be a responsive design site for the sign-up forms. It's pretty great. We should probably learn this first class that wasn't new. It's a really good experience. So that's the thing we can do to ship that quickly. But say, oh, that's my good. But I think we'll 6 months to get it done. So we talk about it, but we're just going through the numbers there and trying to do what's best for getting things into people's hands.
Yeah, I think right now with the state of the technology out there and also the state of most constraints and people doing mobile, you have to end up doing both because people are going to come in through search results. They're going to come in from all these different places that right now aren't really aware of if you have an app in a really effective manner or the apps aren't set up to do deep linking properly or all these other reasons where you have to have the app as a more loyal or an experience for more loyal customers, and then the web for either ad hoc interactions or for people who don't trust you enough to have an app.
Sri, do you see anything different from your position?
We have infinite resources. Just kidding.
Just spend.
Yeah. So, I'm with the basic assumption that, native is awesome for a specific set of experiences, but, you've got to do what your customers want and need at that point in time. So it's, again, specific, segmented, based on the situation. You need to make a call, and most of the times it ends up having a melange of both. So.
Well, I think it also depends where you're at in the company or your project too. I think to play on the native side a little bit, we spend a lot of time on what the interaction for doing something is. So for us, just the act of sending a check, for example. So that's what I'm going to check to my friend. Down to the look and feel, and how the buttons bounce, everything that's a part of that. So there's a level of detail we put to kind of the native experience that nobody of our customers really look for at this point. Some of those things are very, very hard to do on a responsive design site. You can do them, but they take a lot more engineering effort. So depending on what you're trying to solve as well, if you're just putting up and work the first time, and basically what you're doing, if you think they're doing a high expectation for the fit and finish and looks great, then it probably does need to be native app. But we're seeing where you're at.
Yeah, there's a bit of a trap when you start thinking down especially the responsive road, where you sort of have this mindset of like, okay, we'll design out some functionality and then we'll implement it in HTML and then we'll make it so it scales down. And inevitably you end up with something that can't work depending on the context. And small phone and this thing's laid out completely wrong for that use case. So, and that can happen if you do a bad job of designing for a native app too, right? As Sasha said, if you spend so much time in the details in the native app, I think by habit sometimes, and you can forget that you're going to need to spend that same energy and creativity, in a web application as well.
Sri, yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing, right? When you do native, you have the ability to leverage all the rich sensors. And especially coming from a world of wearables and Internet of Things, sensors play a huge role in customer experience. And in the world of mobile, deeper engagement is awesome. In the world of wearables and IoT, you have to be minimalistic when it comes to engagement. To give you an example, you don't want to engage a lot with your smartwatch. The last thing you want is a ban on wearing a smartwatch and riding, for example. So again, if you want to leverage sensors, you want to provide a very specific kind of experience, I think native plays a huge role.
Yeah, and you touch on a very important point. I mean, there was a time not so long ago where just having an app was enough. And then, we're where we are today, which is you need certain features to enhance that engagement. So given current state of the art, what are the features that people should be thinking about including in their app to help with that engagement? And what do you see coming in the future as the next big thing in engagement among apps?
Same question. One of the things is the addition of the extension framework around this. It kind of catches up with this. So people are living for a long time to let apps kind of publish services and consumer services in an app grab. That's something that we think a lot about now. That it's kind of an export opportunity in many ways. That great, what banking app would provide a consumer that would help you out. Whether it's receipts or things organized or something else. We bring those in, attach them to transactions in useful ways. It's interesting as well from a kind of a technical team perspective, measure loyalty because it doesn't necessarily a tight coupling to back-end services to be able to accomplish what. That's always a very tricky thing when we're trying to deliver an experience. In many ways, the app is only as good as the back-end services because it is a service kind of end-to-end. So those things really work tightly. But it also means team dependency and user dependency, so it makes it harder to build things. I think it's very nascent in the of apps to many and more that they could function because they're an app layer provide services to each other. So we'll explore. No idea if it's a good idea or not, but probably a good idea.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is not necessarily what's happening in the app, but what's happening with your business. So again, going back to what type of business you are, if you're a retail person, the number one thing that you should be focusing on isn't necessarily improving a lot of the specific things within your application, but it's how can you tie the entirety of your business to the application so that is one of the easiest ways for somebody to interact with you, whether that be customer support or whether that be something tied to the physical location or whether that be purchase history or loyalty programs. I mean, that's the thinking of the app not as a silo is incredibly important. Again, that depends on the type of business.
Jonathan, do you have?
I'm actually pretty excited about the maturity of the smart object, sort of Internet of Things space, and between watches and wearables and beacons and smart cars and things. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more maturity in the way apps on your smartphone understand how you live your life and what finding good things they can do to help you not have as avoid some of the drudgery that you deal with every day.
Yeah, Sri, I think you probably live further out in the future than most of us in that regard. Like, what do you see coming?
So this is how I segmented from my perspective, right? The world of web, 300 million kind of devices connected to the internet. The world of mobile, 6 to 7 billion devices connected to the internet. The world of Internet of Things and wearables, you're talking 30 billion to 100 billion devices connected to the internet. Our propensity to apply, inertial propensity to apply the rules, the past rules, will be seen, and that has to change. For example, the rules of the web was applied to rules of mobile, and then we all jumped in and said, hooray, we're going to do mobile first. But the rules of mobile will fail miserably in the world of Internet of Things and wearables. I'll give you an example. For example, what you wear is fashion, what you carry is electronics.
Yeah.
You can't apply the rules of electronics to the rules of fashion. And we have seen the parade of uglies, in the past, right? So that's one example. Second one, in the world of web and mobile, we lived in a hyper-notified world. It's great, notifications are awesome, but all of us know that you get a notification of your email on your desktop or your laptop, then your phone buzzes in your butt pocket, and then your wearable buzzes again. It's not possible for us to sustain. There's a tsunami of information coming at you. You need things to be done for you and not done by you. So less is more, right? So in the world of wearables and IoT, the lesser the engagement, the smarter the objects, it's much better. And the third most important thing that's very different in the world of Internet of Things and wearables is, in the world of mobile, you could push everything back to the central cloud, That's great. And you could do analytics and munch data and create and deliver value from a central cloud. But connecting 30 billion objects to a cloud, the scalability is questionable. No one knows whether that's possible. And also, you do not want Google or Dropcam to know that you've put on 2 inches around your waist, right? The last thing you want is Google, giving you suggestions on diet. So the big question here is having distributed computing taking on over centralized computing. Also privacy and security with the number of breaches that has happened, you want to make sure that the data with your baby monitor, the data about Dropcam or Nest is contained, in a unit on its own. And you will start seeing where the mesh becomes the cloud. Think about like blockchain transactions basically like coming up beyond Bitcoin. And I really think the world of Internet of Things and wearables, the rules are going to be vastly different from the world of mobile, but you will see people applying the rules of mobile to IoT and wearables.
This just speaks to that need for very, very careful design, right? And thoughtfulness, because you're talking about making things autonomous and able to make decisions on your behalf.
All right.
And so I think we have to get a lot better at considering how to make that interaction just right.
And what happens when there's no human involved in a lot of those interactions.
I really like what you said about just massive more in general, and it applies to so much, I think it applies it in it's definitely desired to put all the things in the person, the feature is, but just do a couple things really, really well, and if you need to get out of the way, please do. I think that's a big one too, it's with our engagement, and we kind of don't want to engage unless you really need to. We're going to purchase most of the time. Most of the way happens is very short and very quick. We're going to double check a transaction and close it. We're able to send a check. We're going to prompt them to do a lot of those things. But that's what we're really much good as well.
One of the things I think that has more drastically changed the landscape quickly is payments, in that there are organizations who were never in the world of mobile who are kind of being dragged kicking and screaming the same way they were in the days of the debit card to like provide this type of access to consumers. What do you see? How do you see payments changing the landscape for people these days?
Right. It's blowing out there. A few new ways to do payments. New companies coming after it. There's interesting to watch Apple Pay, coming into the wild. There's 2 sides of payments. There's making payments, which is probably plays on both, but making payments buying physical things inside apps and that sort of experience. We're not super focused on that one, obviously. We're actually making payments, swiping a card. But watching Apple Pay come in a while was interesting. So someone like really well, that's the app as a company that understands leverage, which is very much true. That was a product that Mace kind of already had on the shelf. It exists in NFC and wallet. It's not necessarily new. But Apple kind of strong-armed everybody into 6 weeks exclusive agreement. They're like, here, we're doing this, we're putting them out, we negotiate break rates, and kind of jumpstart the card side of the payment world. Well, I think it's super, super early days for all of that stuff. The Apple Pay adoption is really low, even though they've got to have it, because it's a pretty great feature. We're kind of hands-off from our perspective on that. We're people in the world, we'll try to provide, and definitely have support with that, although it's available, website-based payments on Android as well. And for us, more interesting is where people are a bit more of our product is saving for goals, and they can set aside money to buy a thing, knowledge, or a camera, or whatever it is. But there's a payments component to that where we're understanding what they would like to do with their money, and figure out the best way to direct them one way or the other, and the best way to make that money go far for them. That's really important. I think we'll see a lot of payments things will buy up and butt up. They say a lot of banks have a ton of money. Something is acquired by a bank, or something like that, but there's going to be a lot more of that.
Anybody else? Got anything on that?
I think the thing that's happening quite a bit with payments from the first perspective you were talking about of the pure transactions from a consumer to a business is, again, going back to the customer experience side of it. They've made it incredibly easy for a person to transact, not just physically, but inside an application. And that's more things go to. The easier it is, the better the customer experience. And then the more things that the app is expected to provide on the other side in terms of support and other things related to that.
It's a really messy field. I mean, it's something that the banking industry and lots of banks talk about for a long time. Like, oh, you can sign up and you can use my card and you can buy everything and be really fast and like great. Nobody's really doing it, but it's certainly something we still take seriously when we think about, again, this notion of multiple first days. The dream for us would be like, great, you sign up, you get approved, you put money in your account, and you can your card on your phone, and you can buy something in like 15 minutes or less. Like, that is technically possible on Android today. It's probably possible on some Apple or iOS. There's a lot that needs to happen for that to be true, but lots of a bunch of things. There's payments within the card, there's payments with the phone, there's payments to put money into the account through the ACH system, or some other things, Square Cash, or a check writing system. So all of those are different systems with 20 companies and everything that ones do some part of it for you. So it's pretty complex.
I'm curious if we're ever going to crack actually just trading money with each other digitally. Like Square started as a platform for just kind of squaring up, right? Sharing a check. And then turned into, oh, this thing actually solves a problem for small business owners. Cool. And then you had like Venmo, who was doing more of the, peer-to-peer microtransactions. But I think it's a, B2C versus consumer to consumer. I'm mostly curious to see who solves the problem.
It's Square the original one because they were making money yet. Everybody loves it. We're paying every single Square Cash all the time. But every time they do it, they're not making any money yet. So there's that side of it too.
Right.
I think one thing that really effective payments also do is continue to lower switching costs for customers on mobile. So if I'm choosing between a couple services, if the switching costs are really low, that's great for me as a consumer. It's not necessarily good for businesses trying to create repeat purchases and better loyalty. So if the choice is, I have to sign up and create a new account, enter my credit card information, which is still terrible to do on a phone, et cetera, that becomes a lot easier if you have more integrated payments into the platform.
And it's tough in the US too. That's something I would expect to be, it already moves a lot faster than other countries. Germany and UK are pretty advanced systems. The ACH system in the US is very old and monolithic, and they're really involved in how that works. So if you can make it work in the United States, then great, you can probably do well anywhere you want. But even on any bank in Germany, and it's only instantly, for example. It's kind of always worked that way.
Or in Africa, right? With mobile payments, people pay each other money all the time.
I think one of the questions that came in through the meetup group that I'm really intrigued to kind of hear the answer about is we live so much in the B2C world of apps, and yet some of the most interesting applications I've seen have taken place within proprietary environments or B2B environments. Where are they on the spectrum? Do you feel like B2B is ahead of B2C or B2C is ahead? Like, where are they? Sri, you're shaking your head.
Having lived in the enterprise world, as a company that services Fortune 5,000 companies, I think the experience perspective, when you design an app, you want the consumer experience, right? I mean, you have the consumerization of IT that's happened. So I really think the nifty, the swipes and the sexy aspect actually comes from the consumer part of the apps, and that gets implemented into the business apps. So I think that's a transformation that's happening. Every large company has gone through an appification process of their business processes. And they have taken every rule from the consumer side. Yeah, there were days when mailboxes swiping was so sexy, and now I see all our enterprise apps, really boring expense system apps have all the cool stuff, and shaking.
Yeah.
Think about it.
I don't think, thinking, I'm not really an enterprise person, but work with them. They're very nice. And what I've seen is, in a large-scale organization, there's always this drive to optimize and improve efficiency. But I think a mobile strategy, you end up with this discontinuity because someone who's just focused on the incremental optimization of the business process, they're not going to say, hey, let's go out and hire a whole mobile specialized team who understands how to build consumer apps and do all this great new stuff and figure out how to re-architect our business process to suit that. Right? It takes kind of a leap of vision or faith for someone to really push that through. And so it has to be a pretty strategic initiative within the company to make that happen.
I just want to add one thing, right? When mobile took off from a consumer perspective, everything that you do with mobile somehow leverages a part of the cloud. Right? I mean, it's not just the ramp up of mobile, it was a ramp up of cloud. If you actually see the number of smartphones shipped and number of people on social media, it's got a one-to-one correspondence. For math geeks, look at the correlation function between number of people on social networks and number of smartphones shipped. It's like one-to-one almost. So you have cloud, you have to leverage the cloud, and in an enterprise, what do you call a cloud? Talk to a big company and say, I'm going to put everything on Amazon. Even now, people shiver, right? And they say, no, I'm going to do a hybrid cloud. So anything mobile leverages a cloud. So you got to figure out which cloud. And for those of you who have gone through the era of mobile device management, how many companies came and went, and so that aspect plays a huge role, the cloud piece. And anything that you develop in the world of mobile on the consumer space, again, it is wrong to generalize, but you leverage aspects of social media, some kind of advocacy. So that advocacy and the sphere of advocacy in an enterprise changes. And last but not the least, the analytics aspect of it. You can only see the halo effect of the enterprise users because you have a containerized application only focused on the enterprise, and they tend not to expose their data out, and the analytics aspects in an enterprise are not, I wouldn't say as evolved, but I think it's very segmented and focused. So
I think did you have something else?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a big part of it is it's just people as well. The fundamental guidance that sales organization side is the number of people that work at that company. That's a big part of it. And you add more people, you just more people to say, everything's done. And it becomes very hard to do things. And that's true permanently, whether you're 525 or a client or 150, you don't imagine any business that's 5,000 plus. They think that that's the second largest bank in Spain. And there are more than 15,000 people in 36 countries. And we talked to them, and why do they buy something? Well, you have a small, somebody in life, you really figure out this is spreading along any given thing way faster than we would. We all have to do that because we like to learn from it. And it's still spent a lot of time and effort in their own organization to try and do new things. The relation there, which is great. So go us back to the US or go back and fill out a paper form to join. So they're trying to ship apps that are iPad, so they can walk around with them over their counter, let's come up and I'll fill it out with you. Which is one of those big fancy apps. It's an enterprise app. It's been a lot of time and effort on it. But convincing lots and lots and lots of people to change, other people set up on paper forms for over years, and that's worked just fine. It's an interesting argument today. So look at something or something that you're like, it seems to work really well for them. Maybe we should do that.
Right.
It's a tough balance.
I think that goes back to a lot of the stuff that you and I were talking about a little while ago about how the expectations of end users are changing because they have these interactions with these wonderful consumer devices or consumer applications, and then they look at what's happening internally and they're just like, well, this is crap, and I want the good stuff. Let's go and have the good stuff, and that's probably applied to lots of different applications. We have some of our favorite use cases are internal B2B or B2E applications that are really exciting, and that's a function of somebody in the company saying this can be a lot better, and look at how great it is on this other fence, on the other side of the fence.
We've been talking a lot about strategy, but strategy is only as good as the tactics it employs and the outcomes of said tactics. So, given that you all have been on the forefront of this longer than most, what are the types of things either you as a company have been tracking to determine what type of data have you been following to determine if these strategies have been effective, or what have you seen your customers do that have greatly influenced their ongoing strategy around mobile?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we have what we call software analytics product.
What?
Whose whole vision is to understand how people use your software and why it sucks or why it doesn't suck in the case of doing it right. It's funny for a company that's very data driven and is encouraging all of our customers to be very data driven, right? Measure every aspect of how your software works and tune the things that need tuned so that it's faster. It's still a hard challenge to be data driven in your product thinking, and especially in mobile, because unless you're doing web deployed things, you're doing native apps, you have to think through ahead of time, what do we want to measure, right? What matters in the way people use our application when it's out in the world, and how do we take all of that data and collect it, and then how do we make decisions off of that, right? Even things like A/B testing and making a change to the app and measuring whether it actually changed the way people use it. It just takes a lot of forethought to think through that, and I think I'm excited because there are a lot of companies, not just New Relic, really pushing the envelope in terms of reducing the amount of thinking you have to do before you release your app and not regretting the choices you made. Being able to go back and look at historical data with a new lens if you decide that you'd actually like to know whether people in China are using your app more than they did with the last release, or is it, are they using it for longer? Are they going back to that same screen more times than they really should because there's probably a bug in it, or they're confused?
Sasha, I see you nodding a lot.
It's really tough. A lot of plant was Google's predecessor of Airship, so one of the benefits of Airship is that you've seen a lot of different apps and how it's all working, and I remember one thing that always struck me is how many companies and how many apps, top properties, and how many users in the phone constantly are coming and asking, how should we do this? How should we measure this? Like, what we got it right? I worked in a couple of places too. It takes all this availability to do it perfectly, analytics implementation, it's going to tell you all this, what's all these things. And if you had it, it's very, very difficult. So it's, it's like it takes a lot of forethought, to really think about what you want to measure, and how much it matters to you. I think there's a replacement for just talking to people as well, looking at their hands and asking them. So they're a very large customer representative team, so they're very high touch with the customers, so we're working with them a lot of the time to understand whether a change is really a difference or not. They'll come to us and make a change, or cropping things and without capture, it's 10% drop in approved checks. It's things of that nature, but that really will come through the customer care team because they'll be the first to see it. But all that is just a relationship. People are talking to the customers. That can help. They're developing a lot faster than trying to record all the right data and figure out, is that the right thing? Is that a side effect? But you have to try and do what you can on those areas. So I try to do that if we're doing it right, because all the others got it perfectly out.
Yeah, I also don't know really any customer who feels that their app is at 100%. that they're done in any way that doesn't have a really gigantic roadmap. So the issue isn't necessarily I need to figure out what to do next. It's I have all of these things and I have to do all of them. In many cases, it's how can I justify additional expense to do more, or justify the success of mobile within the business so that more people will realize that it's actually happening and it's real and it's important and people actually use it. So the ROI is often one of the largest things that we're being asked for, not from us, but from how can we prove that our programs, our mobile programs, are successful so that we can get more.
And Sri, I mean, what happens when there's not a human in that involvement? Like when it's machines talking to machines, what should people be looking for there?
Disasters. I say that when you're talking about like machine-to-machine communication, one has to be very careful. You know, again, I'm going into the world of Internet of Things. Is you're not shifting all the data back, you know, to the centralized location. You know, you're basically taking a cluster which has storage. It's got some limited amount of intelligence, you know, triaging that happens in there, and you need to iterate, you know, because there are certain corner cases that you will miss, and you know, and you just have to keep iterating. And I think it's a combination of hygiene, which includes like, you know, multiple iterations, collecting the data, figuring out the corner cases, and extreme curiosity on how that specific device, you know, it could be Internet of this table, or we were talking about a sensor for the fire patrol, right? So the point here is, you know, a combination of hygiene, curiosity, is absolutely required in machine-to-machine communication at this point in time.
You could bury yourself in order just an apps too. I mean, it could be some concussion, but you know, I declared bankruptcy at one point in the civil lab. So, you know what? The way I thought about it was to just really look everything out and just go back in. It's a very actual question with an answer, and we'll just put it in. So we get a lot of questions and we're like, oh, I don't know, explain it. Like, where am I doing that? Like, we put it in. Let's sit down and talk about how you want to do that, or we'll ship that in a month, you know, no problem. But, you know, we're at the point where you just kind of see forest for the trees, so, you know, start over.
Sri said, you know, curiosity too, right? The willingness to look at what you have in front of you and ask different questions, and then again figure out whether it's worth measuring them, right?
Cool. Well, I always hate it when you have some great people like this in the room and you don't get the chance to talk to them. We didn't even make it through half of the questions that you had sent in. So hopefully we hit upon your questions. But what I would like to do is give the panelists a round of applause, and then have, if people have questions that